Hi and welcome to Mountain Chef. I'm going to teach you guys some pretty cool things today about cooking venison. This is a venison loin steaks, and this is off of a white-tailed deer. This is probably killed in Montana, I believe, and so it'll taste a lot similar to the mule deer that we have here in Utah. I'm going to show you a couple of tricks with this to make a meal that is unbelievable quality, and a couple of cooking techniques that you might not know. The cooking technique we're going to use with this is called pan roasting the venison. It'll turn out to be moist and tender every time. And with my meal, I'm going to do some mashed potatoes. And I just have some small red potatoes here, and I'm using the small red potatoes because they have a higher sugar content than the brown potatoes. And where I'm not doing a whipped potato, I'm trying to use a little bit more of a chunky. I'm going to use these red potatoes because they'll hold up better. I've also got some asparagus, and we're going to be doing it with a demi glace sauce. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of this Mountain Chef venison seasoning, and we're going to put it on the steaks ahead of time. The amazing thing about this Mountain Chef is it has over 50 active enzymes in it, and the enzymes are going to go to work on this steak and tenderize it, give it a lot more flavor, and enhance it through the enzymatic process of breaking down these proteins. It works really, really well. You can use this upwards of overnight. I like to let it sit for just about 10-15 minutes. It works really, really well. You're going to want to put this on fairly liberally. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and turn these over and season the other side. Now I have one other tool here that I have found invaluable when cooking a lot of different meats, especially in the case of this venison here. This is a fairly large buck, an older buck, and when you get older venison or older meat of any type, it tends to be a little bit more tough. This tool right here is called jacquard. If you pull this back, you can see it has a lot of different knife points on it. And just running this through really quickly will help break up some of those proteins and make it a lot more tender. Okay, so what I've done here, I've taken a cast iron skillet, I've put a little bit of canola oil on the bottom, and preheated it so it's nice and hot. The hotter the better. You can always tell when the oil's about ready to go because you can see a little bit of smoke coming off the top of the pan. The canola oil will start to smoke at about 400 degrees, and so you can tell it's hot enough at that point. I'm just going to go ahead and grab these steaks, set them right in the oil. You should have a really nice sizzle when you do it. Now, you don't want to leave this for very long, because what we're trying to do now is actually sear the meat and seal all the juices and flavor inside, plus give it a nice crusty outside edge. So we're going to leave it on here for just a couple of minutes, and you want to be able to shake it and move it, not have it stick to the bottom. So if you go ahead and look at that, that's very, very nicely caramelized. And that's all we're really trying to do, is just get a nice caramelized layer on these steaks. Now here's the thing, you could fry these, but the problem you get when you cook it this manner is you're going to get the outside way overcooked and the inside will not be cooked enough. Because it takes a lot of time for that heat to penetrate into the meat and get it to the right state. So what we're trying to do right now is just get that outside nice and seared and then call it good. Now earlier I showed you about the Mountain Chef seasoning. That Mountain Chef seasoning has been sitting on here for about 10 to 15 minutes, and those enzymes have had a chance to get down in there and break up the proteins. It gives it a milder flavor. If there's any blood left in the meat, it'll break down the blood so you don't get that liver flavor to your venison. As well as it'll actually help it to become a lot more tender. And you can find that seasoning on my website, which is mountainchefllc.com. We have them for sale there. We're going to go ahead and check this other side. That looks really good. Now at this point, we just want to turn the stove off. We want to pull these steaks out, and I'm going to set them directly onto a cooling rack and let them cool down. Now this step is super, super important, because right now that outside edge of that meat is between 400 and 500 degrees. If you're to throw it in the oven at this point, it's going to overcook the meat and allow that outside edge to be really brown. What we're trying to do is bring this down to an ambient room temperature. And then that way, when we put it into the oven to roast it, it's going to bring the whole steak to the same temperature at the same time, giving you perfect doneness all the way through. Okay, so now these steaks have rested for about 15 minutes, and if you feel them, they don't feel hot, they don't feel cold, they're about an ambient temperature. This is a point where you want to roast them off. Really, really, really important you let them cool down, because like I said before, if you don't do that, you're going to overcook the outside and undercook the middle. Now these are an ambient temperature. I'm going to place them inside this Dutch oven. And you notice I've got a trivet in here. If you don't have a trivet, that's okay. You can also use onion rings that are cut really thick and set them up on top of the onion rings. It'll do the same exact thing. The biggest thing is I want to get the air to circulate all the way around the steak and bake it really nice and evenly. This will give you a perfect oven roast. So we're going to go ahead and set this in the oven. I've got the oven set to 360 degrees. Okay, so now these have been in for a little under 20 minutes. I just inserted the thermometer and we are at 137 degrees. So we're just about right to pull these. So I'm going to go ahead, check all these steaks. 140, that's medium rare. Nice. And we're going to set them on a cooling rack. Now it's important to let these sit and relax for another 5 minutes or so before you go in and cut in and eat them. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we have this pan that we just seared the steak in. We've got some really nice drippings in the bottom. We're going to make our demi glace sauce. What I've got here is 3 tablespoons of real butter. I'm going to set that in there, let it start to brown up a little. And I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of flour. And this is going to create a roux. And this roux is what's going to thicken it as well as add flavor to it. And it'll also mix with those nice flavorings from the steak in there. This is really important to do this because this roux adds a ton of flavor to this as well as thickening it. We're going to want to bring it up to what's called the blonde roux stage, to the dark blonde roux stage. And you'll see as it cooks into the flour, it'll actually turn to a dark blonde in color. It's actually getting pretty close right now, and you can smell the flour cooking. And that's really important to give you a lot of flavor in there. See how it's starting to go dark in color? And that's perfect. That's exactly what you want to have happen. So that's about a dark blonde in color. Didn't take long because our pan is already really hot. So we're going to take 2 cups of water and pour it in there and whisk it in immediately. Now, when you're taking your whisk, you want to scrape on the bottom, make sure you get all those nice little chunkies of meat. Back off of the bottom, because that'll add flavor to your sauce. And we're just going to let that boil. Now, this is our demi glace. And what this demi glace is it's a sauce that has been reduced down with beef bones and some red wine and other aromatics. You can buy this at some grocery stores, but also you can find it online. Amazon.com, you can type in demi glace, and it's spelled G-L-A-C-E. You can find it. These are about $3 a pack. I always keep a few of them in the house. They're just so wonderfully rich. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. I'm just going to take the whole packet and put it in there. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and whisk that in. And then there's one other ingredient that we're going to put on there, and that's going to be the beef base. Now this beef base, I stumbled upon this a couple of years ago. This stuff is amazing. You can get it at any grocery store. Works a heck of a lot better than bouillon. And the beef base is only a couple dollars for this, but this should last you several months, depending on how much you cook. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a tablespoon of this into this demi glace. And set that in there. And at this point, we're just going to let this cook and meld, and it'll be fantastic. Part of this meal we're going to do asparagus. It's springtime. Asparagus grows wild around here. It's actually pretty inexpensive this time of year. I love asparagus, love the flavor of it. One of the downfalls that people have, or complaints they have about asparagus, is the toenail texture, the really tough and nasty texture. The way you get rid of that is you just take the asparagus, grab it by both ends, and then just bend it. And the asparagus will snap right where it is tender. So these top parts are really nice and tender, where that bottom part will be kind of rough and tough. You can discard them, or you could peel them or cook them slowly to make them a little more tender, but I just like to bend them, snap them, and just cook the tender parts of the asparagus. Okay, so for this asparagus, we're just going to saute the asparagus really easily with some olive oil and some salt. I love to have the sea salt. Very, very good. This is made here in Utah, mined in Redmond. And then I'm going to use just a teeny bit of balsamic vinegar for flavor. So it's really quite easy. I've just put the asparagus into a hot cast iron skillet, pour just enough olive oil over the top to make sure that it's coated. And then I'm just going to sprinkle it with the sea salt. And at this point, I'm just going to saute it just for a few minutes. You don't want it too much. As soon as you see it start to brown just a little bit, it's done. A lot of people overcook the asparagus and make it a little soggy and lose a lot of its flavor. We're trying to accent the flavor of the asparagus and keep it in. Okay, so what we want to do here, the asparagus, you can always tell when it's done because it'll be a little bit limp and have a little bit of browning to it, so we're going to throw it right into the plastic bag. Now at this point, I'm going to put the balsamic vinegar in. So this is a balsamic vinegar. This is not a particularly expensive one, but it still tastes pretty dang good. Just a little bit ought to do. Now I'm going to close up the bag. Just give this a quick toss. Now I'm going to run it underneath cold water, and this will shock the asparagus and stop it from cooking any further. Alright, so what we're going to do here, our potatoes are done. I used a knife and just poked through to make sure they're tender. That's all we need to cook them for. I'm going to add just a little slice of butter, in this case about a tablespoon. I always use real butter to everything I do. And then we're going to use some heavy cream. I don't need a whole heck of a lot of that either, but that will add a lot of richness to the potatoes. And then I'm going to use that same Mountain Chef venison seasoning I used for the deer. I'm going to use that on the potatoes as well. It works really good as an all-purpose seasoning, but it'll tie the meal together really nicely. So then, all I'm going to do is use my potato masher. I'm not trying to whip these potatoes really, really smooth or run them through a ricer or anything. I actually want them to stay a little coarse for what we're trying to do with this meal. So here we are. We have our finished plate. This is our venison loin roast with our sauteed asparagus with balsamic, our perfect mashed potatoes, and our demi glace. And this just looks amazing. I'm excited to tear into it. And this is something you can do at home. So simple, so easy. You know, however you decide to plate it is up to you, but it's a really simple dish to make. I'm going to cut into this steak right here. And come take a look at that. Look how perfectly that's cooked. We have that medium rare all the way through, top to bottom. There's no brown on it. That's perfectly pan roasted venison. And that concludes the pan roasting venison. And you can find these tips and other tips of cooking in my books. And they're all found on my website, mountainchefllc.com. And you can find my books on Amazon or cedarfort.com. Thank you.